All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you just heard a noise, that was just my dog. So I just want to let you know that we are going to be recording this session, and it's going to be available to view later on the DCAGT website, on our YouTube channel, as well as on the DCAGT and the DCSD websites. So I am Becca Coster, and I'm going to be your moderator this evening. Before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about DCAGT. So DCAGT stands for the Douglas County Association for Gifted and Talented. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're an all-volunteer organization. We're made up of family members, community members, and educators. And we are an affiliate of the Colorado Association for Gifted and Talented. So today, oh, that's my dog. We are going to be learning about the CogAT. So we are joined by Misty Burkhart. She's the coordinator of Advanced Academics and Gifted Programming at DCSD, and she's going to be guiding us in our learning this evening. So Misty will be presenting to us, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. You are more than welcome to type your questions into the chat at any time. If you're like me, sometimes I have a question and I have to get it out before I forget what it is. So you're more than welcome to do that. And you can type your questions in the chat, or if you prefer to remain anonymous, you can email info@dcagt.org, and I can get your questions that way. So I would like to welcome Misty. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Of course, I'm excited to do this one because we haven't had a CogAT presentation for parents in a while, and I think it's much needed. So thank you for inviting me to do that.
Yes.
And I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
And let me know can you see the slideshow?
Yes, there it is.
Perfect. Thank you. So as Becca said, I'm Misty Burkhart. I'm the coordinator of Advanced Academics and Gifted Programming. This is my 7th year in the role, but I've been in Douglas County for 15 years. I am the one who trains all of our staff on how to administer the CogAT, and I also train them on how to interpret those results. And during testing season, I eat, breathe, and sleep CogAT, pretty much. I've included my email down there in case you would like to email me directions with any questions that you have. Also let you know I'm getting over a cold, so hopefully I don't have a huge coughing fit. But if I end up needing to mute my computer, that's why. So hopefully it goes okay. Okay, so CogAT, interpreting the data, kind of looking at everything. I always use this picture because it's not the most exciting presentation. Usually I try to include pictures and jokes and even videos and things like that. But this one is real kind of, here's the information, here's the data, and here's the analysis of that. So just bear with me. I always tell my people I'm training, have a little bit of coffee, but it's late at night, so you might not want to do that. But go ahead and bear with me. It's not that exciting of slides. So the Cognitive Abilities Test, or the CogAT, is designed to measure both general and specific reasoning abilities. That's the key right there. That's what it's measuring, those reasoning abilities. Sometimes they're in specific areas, but it also is looking at reasoning across the board. The development of these abilities begin at birth and continue through early adulthood. This is not an achievement test. So the test is not intended to measure what a student has been taught in a particular grade level in school. So sometimes parents think that, oh, well, I can have my child study for the test. You really can't. The whole point is to show them something new and look at their problem-solving abilities. This isn't like an iReady test or a MAP test that measures where students are in that grade level and what they've learned. So it, again, measures that reasoning abilities across the board. We are currently using Form 7. That's just the version of the assessment that we have. It's the newest version, so we're all up to date. And looking at this, there are three primary reasons that we use the CogAT. So the first one is to help teachers adapt instructional goals, methods, and their materials to those individual needs and the abilities of students. So we do a lot of training after the scores come out with our staff to talk about how they can use that information and help them plan for programming for students, for all students. The other reason is to provide an alternate measure of cognitive development, not captured in school grades or other measures of achievement. So this really is the only group administered cognitive assessment that's available out there that we think covers all the different areas, but it's the only one that we use in our district. So we're using this for a lot of different reasons, but it's used for all students, not just for identification for gifted. The third reason is to identify students whose levels of cognitive achievement are substantially lower or higher than expected given their scores. So we make sure we're walking through with our staff members when looking at all students, but looking at those ranges to see that they might have some unique needs that we might need to look at putting into place. So there's three sections to the CogAT. The first one is the verbal section. That includes 3 subtests, which includes sentence completions, analogies, and verbal classification. Now for our kindergarten through 2nd grade, we do the alternate verbal, which just takes out the sentence completion portion to make it that less language load as much as possible. For quantitative, it has number analogies, number puzzles, and number series. And then nonverbal has figure matrices, paper folding, and figure classification. So we have 9 total subtests, but the main batteries are the verbal, quantitative, and nonverbal. And those are the scores that you will see as well. For the verbal and quantitative, they're really looking at that general knowledge that individuals use in a particular age group, because we're looking at it by age, what they could have acquired from just a broad variety of experiences. So again, not something you could study for in class. It measures inductive and deductive reasoning, kind of that flexibility, and also that fluency to work in some of those tasks. And then scores on these batteries are influenced both by their verbal and quantitative knowledge and their abilities to use that knowledge to solve novel tasks. So they're looking at what they've experienced, what that level of reasoning is, and then they're giving them new tasks that they haven't seen before to really look at their problem-solving skills. Then the nonverbal items, students must possess a storehouse of procedure and strategies for solving those novel problems. So this doesn't rely really on even anything before. It's really looking at the structures of how can they solve this? Here's something brand new. Here's an example that we're looking at maybe for math, that quantitative, and we're working with numbers and seeing how they're able to solve that. The composite score is when we put all 3 of those scores together, and it gives us, again, that overall level of cognitive abilities. This is not an IQ score. Some people think it is, such as we have some other assessments sometimes that we give students. The Wisc or the DOS, you might have heard. Those are one-on-one IQs tests that are typically given to students who are going through the special education process. So it's not an IQ score, but it's high level of reasoning. So it's similar, but it's not the same. I know that's a little confusing. So we offer this for grades, well, all students in elementary. In 2nd grade, we offer what we call a universal screening. So that means that we make sure that all 2nd graders take the CogAT. We want to do that because we want to find students that might not be obvious that we're looking at, either for identification or, again, to use that data for all students for programming. This is often done in February. The last few years have been a little bit different, and we've moved it to February is a good time for second grade. They have a little bit more, have been in school a little bit longer after the break. They're a little bit more refreshed. So we give that to second grade in February. We also take referrals for gifted identification. So if a parent or from the school refers a child and says we'd like for them to go through the gifted identification process, they can refer their child in K and 1, K for kindergarten and first grade, and then we can also give them the CogAT on that request. We do know that sometimes with kindergartners and first grade, it's not the best time to give an assessment, and sometimes it is, but that's why we usually wait till second grade to see if we can get some better results. So then for grades 3rd through 6th grade, we also every year do another universal screen for either 5th grade or 6th grade. So this depends on your elementary school and what's the last grade of that school. So if you're in a school that goes to 5th grade, the 5th grade students are going to take the CogAT. If you're in a school that goes to 6th grade, then the 6th grade students will take the CogAT. Again, it's for all students to do that universal screen. We do that in November with students. The reason why we don't do it in February or in the spring is that's when we have the state testing with CMAS. There's other testing going on, and we don't want to burn them out. We want some good results. So that's why we've chosen more in the fall to give it to our 5th and 6th graders. During this time, 3rd through 6th grade referrals for gifted identification. And this is really, should be 3rd through 5th. Same thing with the K1. If there are students in the 3rd to 5th grade, their parents would like to refer them for the gifted identification process, they can refer their child. And part of that process, because we gather a lot of different evidence, part of that process is to give them the CogAT if they don't already have a cognitive assessment. Oftentimes they already do because they most likely took it in 2nd grade, but there's other reasons why they might not, especially if they've moved in. So the test used to be paper and pencil, and we used to bubble it in. I have been giving the CogAT since, I don't know, about 20 years or so, back when you did the bubbling and we had parents come in and help us. Just recently, we were able to change that, which is much better for our assessment. So it's online, and the students put in their headphones, and they have the audio, and they can repeat the directions. There's the button, say, oh, I wasn't sure about that. They can repeat the directions. They can go back afterwards and go back and check their answers. It's a very easy system to use. The only thing that you do paper and pencil is students are given scratch paper for the quantitative section, but just that section. Everything else is online. The other thing that we love that CogAT is online now is that they have different languages for those directions. So we can give students the CogAT in their native language, either Spanish, Arabic, Somali, Cantonese, Mandarin, Vietnamese, or Russian. So all of those are available, which is really nice to have. We also provide accommodations for students. If they have an individual education plan or an IEP, or if they're on a 504 plan. If that is in place and there are accommodations written into the plan, we will make sure that students also get those accommodations taking the CogAT. Because remember, this is for all students. And we're also looking for students. We know that there's twice exceptional students out there as well. So they need to have the accommodations that are listed in their plan. And our facilitators that help run this process at the schools, they do a really nice job of making sure that's covered, talking with the special education teachers, the ESL teachers, all the powers that be to make sure they have that information. So once we've given them the test, we have the scoring. So the first, well, there's a couple different scores on there, but the ones that you should really concentrate on mostly is the age percentile rank. So we always use the age percentile because we have students who maybe they're a whole year or towards the beginning of the year or the end of the year, that's a pretty big gap. So we do get the grade percentile ranks, but when we're looking specifically at the data, we always use the age percentile rank. The other thing that it shows up on, it's called the student narrative. That's what's sent home to parents. It also shows the number of items that are in the different areas, so the verbal, quantitative, or nonverbal, and the number attempted. So sometimes you won't get a score because the student did not answer enough questions. And that will help sometimes where maybe you'll have a score for verbal, maybe they didn't answer enough in quantitative and that's blank, and then they answered in nonverbal and you have a score for that one. It will show that on there, and towards the bottom, there's a key that will say, no score because of didn't answer enough questions. But these are kind of the main ones that you want to look at when you're looking at that scoring sheet. So when we're looking at scores, they're nationally normed percentiles. So we're looking at students. We're looking at students. Sorry, that totally threw me off. So when you're thinking about students, this is not percentage. That's if maybe a student takes a math test and they get 80% of the questions correct. That is not what this is. This takes your score and gives you a percentile. So the 50th percentile is average, and the scores range from the first percentile to the 99th percentile. So I have so this helps a little bit. So this is the bell curve when we're looking at that. So these are often where students are scoring. In the blue section is where the majority of the students fall. That's in the 50th percentile. If your student scores in the 50th percentile, that means that they have scored better than 49% of the national for the students their age taking the test at that time. So same for, it shows up here like an example. I don't know why they broke them up like this, but 84th percentile, that means that the student has done better than 83% of the national students that age taking the test within those 2 months. So when you're looking at this, like I said, most of the students are going to be in here. Then you have really the 25th percentile looking about to the 75th percentile. That's in the normal range. So they might have students in the lower range, but still in the normal, all the way up to the 75th. So that's the normal range. So if you get a score back and it's in the 52nd percentile, that's average, that's normal, that's okay. Some people freak out a little bit about that till we go over this. What we make sure is when our scores come back that we work with our gifted education facilitators to go through all that data. And we're really looking at students on both ends. So students who are struggling that score like the 25th percentile or lower, we have them go and get some more information on that student. They might need to share that information with a teacher, a special education specialist. It's a piece of the puzzle that we're using. And again, it's the only group administered cognitive assessment we have in the district. So it can be really useful when we're looking at students who might be struggling and might need some different programming options. The same is true for the other side. So when we're looking up in this area, really students probably like the 85th percentile and above, they're going to need a little bit more different instruction depending. And then if they're in the 95th percentile or higher that comes up on any of the batteries, they're automatically referred for gifted education through this process. So the referral means that instead of a parent saying, hey, I'd like my child to be looked at for gifted identification, we look at that data and say, hey, there's something here. They're in the top 5% of students who scored nationally. We need to look closer. So we let parents know, and then we start the identification process Now, sometimes we go through that, and sometimes with all the other data provided, sometimes they're identified, sometimes they're not, but they're advanced and still need some differentiated instructional opportunities. And this is part of what I just said. So students who score at the 95th percentile or above on one or more of those batteries will have the identification process started for them. And we always say, as Dr. Robin Carey, who is our previous director, loved to say, they did not score that high because they had their Wheaties that day. So you can have a false negative, which means maybe a student was having a bad day, maybe they got distracted, they weren't feeling well, or they didn't really care that day. And so they weren't really paying as much attention, right? So sometimes we get some of those lower scores and they don't match up with all the other data we have about a student. And we go, well, we know that those aren't accurate. They're not matching. But you cannot get a false positive. If you get those advanced scores, they didn't just guess their way to those advanced scores. But again, we look at this and we combine it with a complete body of evidence when we're looking at identification. Includes achievement scores like iReady, MAP. It also includes information from the classroom teacher for norm reference surveys that we give to them. And then we're also looking at classroom performance. What does it look like in the classroom? How are they doing in those areas? We also gather, as many of you know, we ask for parent surveys, and then we ask students to fill out a survey, and sometimes we'll do an interview with them as well. So we collect a very large body of evidence, and this is just one piece of that puzzle. So I just wanted to clarify that, because some people will say, well, they missed being identified because of 1% on the gifted test. So this is not the gifted test. This is good for all students that we use. It's just one of the ways that we look for that full body of evidence to see if a student qualifies and in what strength area they might qualify in. Okay, so this, I think you'll be interested in the interactive ability profile. So this is when you get the student narrative profile sent out to you with all the scores. At the bottom of the report, they will tell you that you can go to CogAT.com and put in the numbers, and they'll have numbers for them, numbers and letters that you can put into this formula. And then it will print out a 3 to 4 pages of suggestions for teachers to help in the classroom, and also ways that you can support the child at home. So we like to emphasize this. There's a lot of good information there through this ability profile when we get it. So we make sure that our staff knows about that and uses it as well. But parents, absolutely, it's a great idea for you to go in and do that too. So an example of this, so all you have to do, it's really easy to remember, just go to CogAT.com, CogAT.com. And if you scroll down, you'll see the ability profiles. Here are 3 different examples of the ability profile. So this one is 2B Q+. The Q+ means that the quantitative is a strength for them. Then if we're looking at the 5B, the N negative means that nonverbal is a weakness, right? Same with the Q negative, quantitative might be the weakness. Sometimes they don't have that at all. And this also does the stay nines. So 2, 5, 8, all of those. If you think about that bell curve and you chop that up into 9 different sections, that's where that is as well. Not as important that you need to know those ones, but just so that you know when you see that and go, oh, I can put that in. So this is a 2B Q+. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So I just put in CogAT.com and it brings you to this website, and it says CogAT here. We have the testing through Riverside Insights. That's why you'll see that up here. That's the platform that we're using. And so if you're like, well, it's CogAT lower, but yes, you're in the right place. And so it talks about here Remember, we are using Form 7. There is Form 8, but it's the same thing. It's just a little bit different. So it really doesn't matter which one you use. One's not more updated than the other one is. So it has some information for parents. And then if you come down here, this is where the ability profile is. So sometimes you'll fill out all of these and sometimes you won't. So we'll go to our example, 2BQ plus. If we go to, so our stay 9 is 2. If we go into B, relative strength. So remember that was the Q plus. Now this did not save a relative weakness. So you do have to go in and select none or else it won't work. So once you do that, see 2B, Q plus, it pops up with characteristics of students with these profiles, instructional suggestions, other general instructional suggestions, right? Focus on working memory, scaffold wisely, just a lot of really good information in here when grouping, that type of thing. So this is really nice for you to be able to put in. Let's do one more just so that we can see that. So let's do 8EQ minus. So then we're just going to go up and we're going to enter another profile. So we're going to clear it. So this was 8, stay 9, 8, E. And there wasn't, remember, a relative strength. So we're going to put none, but a relative weakness was Q minus, right? So this is similar, 7EQ minus and 8EQ minus. So this is for both of those. Make sure I did that one right. Yep, 8EQ minus. Again, characteristics, suggestions for this specific profile, and then suggestions for students who are in that median range. Remember, that's the bell curve that we cut up into 9 pieces. So just really, really good information. And we often print this out for teachers to use as well. So hopefully that was helpful too. So when we do get these scores back, we will send a letter home along with the scores to parents. We also share them with classroom teachers. So what our gifted education facilitator will do is either during a staff meeting or during maybe it's their planning time. Usually once a week, teachers meet with different people in the school to talk about data, curriculum, students, all kinds of things. And sometimes they'll use that time to go through these scores with teachers because they can look at the whole class together. And when they're looking at those ability profiles, they can also look at grouping students who are in the same ones. But it also really gives them that information. So it's more than just here are the scores. We do actual training around how to interpret them and how to use them. We also might be sharing these with special education teachers if we have students who are struggling and maybe they've already been identified as needing an IEP or 504, or maybe it's a student who's just really struggling and we're not quite sure why. And it's really valuable to have a cognitive assessment on a student to just see, could be a twice exceptional student as well. And then of course, different support specialists depending on the needs. And then we also share them with administrators. So what's nice about that is that they can look at the whole school and see, right? So they'll be able to see all their second graders and then all their fifth or sixth graders, where they're landing, what those groupings might look like, that information to have. It's just really good to help us when we're looking at planning for students. And we do also training around that as well, instead of just here are the scores. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that we are really purposeful about that and adding that piece of the puzzle to the other data and information that we already know about students. Okay, I did a lot of talking, so I am ready for questions.
All right. So again, you can type your questions into the chat, or you can email your questions to info@dcagt.org if you wish to remain anonymous. And while you do that, we have our first question. So I'll go ahead and read the first one. And this is from Jen. So
Yeah.
she says, thank you both for this DCAGT Live. How new are the new languages? And hers is a multi-part. So do you want me to give you the whole thing or just one part at a time?
How about one part at a time?
Okay. So how new are the new languages?
Yep. So they implemented that starting last year to have all of those languages. And before that, I think they had the Spanish directions. We've always had Spanish directions that we could read aloud if somebody speaks Spanish. But now that we moved to online, that's always been available since we started. I think we started, this is our, well, it's hard with COVID. I can't remember anything pre-COVID basically, but I think it's the 4th or 5th year that we've used CogAT Online.
Okay, wonderful. And then the second part of the question is there an official communication that can be sent to families who don't speak English natively to inform them of these changes?
Yes. So we do have all of the information that we send out to our facilitators. We are able to provide that in English and Spanish. The other thing that we ask our facilitators to do is to talk to our English language teachers, ESL teachers, to really see who in the school whose parents do speak a different language, have and their native language and needs communication in that language. Then what we can do is we either do a phone call with them where we have an interpreter, or sometimes we can have that sent out in a different language, like the actual letter, depending on the request. So we really rely on our ESL teachers to let us know that that's available.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then the last part was more of a statement. It says just in case a non-native English speaker took the test last year in English and could possibly do much better in their native language.
Yep, if that's a concern or a question that you have, I would reach out to your gifted education facilitator. We have one at every school. A lot of them have other positions as well, but everybody has one, including our charters. So you can go ahead and check with them, or you can check with your ESL teacher. Sometimes the ESL teacher will say all their other assessments are in English, so we can do that one. But if a parent has concerns about that, you can absolutely call them and they'll work with you as a team. We always say the team for the student, the parents are part of that team.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, as somebody whose parent is a non-native English speaker, that's really important. So I really
Yes.
appreciate that.
We do. We want to make sure when, especially with our identification, that we are finding our underrepresented populations. And that includes emerging bilingual students. And we want to make sure that they have everything possible to help so that we get accurate information on them instead of having all these roadblocks in the way.
Right, definitely. All right, so our next question comes from Kara. So what can be done for those students who are potentially 2E but don't have a 504 or an IEP in place to assist with the test taking?
So that I would talk with the teacher and ask about the other assessments and what is being used. Some things we can do, like a small group or one-on-one without having a plan. Some of the other things that are put in there, this is from the CogAT, this is from Riverside. They do have to have those in a plan in order to get those accommodations. If it's something that is needed, that's why I would start talking with the teacher and the facilitator to see. And also the other thing is sometimes they're offered and it's not always used. So that's the other way that they look at that as well. But yeah, go ahead and check with them.
Okay, wonderful. And if anyone doesn't know how to find out who the gifted education facilitator at your school is, you can go to the DCSD website and you can just use the A to Z search and just type in gifted. And then on the, I think it's the neighborhood little tab, then
Yep.
it'll list all the facilitators by school.
Yep. Let me show you. So if you go, so here, I obviously have it bookmarked because it's our website.
Yes.
But if you do the A to Z, it'll come up and you can under G for gifted. So once you're on our page, there's a lot of different information over here, but you want to go to school-based staff and support. So if you click on that tab, it's going to bring you up with some information, and then it has everybody's school and their gifted education facilitator, their email, and this is also, we include on here their gifted identification referral form if you want to refer your child. And this is all by feeders. So if you're looking, this is Chaparral, or I'm sorry, by regions, right? So in Parker, so these are the ones here. Then the Legend feeder is down here. Ponderosa is down here. So you've got their emails right there and the referral form if needed.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. So our next question is from Marnie. And the question is how do CogAT results generally compare with the Wisc 5 in the same student?
So it depends. Sometimes if we know a student is going to do well on the CogAT, they will most likely do well on the Wisc as well. The Wisc, since it's a one-on-one administered assessment, that goes, has a little bit more information to it. And sometimes students feel a little bit more comfortable one-on-one. So sometimes we'll see that a little bit more. But we know for the majority of our students that the CogAT is the best group administered cognitive assessment that's available. It can be pricey, but we know that that's important for our students that we have that, including those universal screens.
Wonderful, thank you. And then if you all have more questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'm gonna go and check my email box really quickly.
And I'll go back to the beginning so you guys can see my email in case you're wanting to email me as well.
Wonderful.
I will probably not answer any of them tonight, but I will tomorrow.
Definitely. And then if you all are formulating additional questions, we'll be happy to answer those. And then I'm going to put a link to a survey and ask that if you have a moment, you can go ahead and take the survey. It'll help us make sure that you guys get the information that you want out of the DCAGT lives. And then I actually have a question in terms of a twice exceptional student taking the CogAT. Do they sometimes, like, what are some of the possible outcomes for the CogAT? Like, do they perform as expected? Do they sometimes perform not as well as expected, sometimes better? Like, how does that look?
It completely depends on the student. We always say if you've met one twice exceptional student, you've met one twice exceptional student. So it really would depend how they would do. For example, if they maybe have a lot of test anxiety, maybe looking through that, they might not have might not show as better results for that. But there's a way to kind of calm them down, or like I said, we can do small groups, things like that. So that's why we have those specific accommodations in place. It really ends up leveling the field. It doesn't give them an advantage. It levels the field for them. So it depends on the students and what their strengths are and what their struggles are too.
Okay, wonderful. And then we have another question. This is from Jen. So if your child doesn't perform as well as you thought that they would, is there an individually administered test that parents can request?
So we're not like special education where you can go in and you can request to go through the evaluation. You can request that a student goes through the gifted identification process, absolutely. But part of that is giving the CogAT. So in very, very rare cases, we might do a Wisc if that's necessary. But again, most of the students, that isn't needed, or there's other ways to look at it. And again, it's just one part of a body of evidence. We're looking at achievement, class performance, all of those other areas. So usually that is what most students need, but on very rare occasions, sometimes we will look at that. But it's not a thing where you can just go and request it. Yeah, because it has to be administered by a school psychologist.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. All right. Well, it looks like we're out of questions.
Okay.
So I would like to thank you so much, Misty, for coming this evening and teaching us more about the CogAT. I know I personally,
They want
okay.
to sneak in?
A couple more questions. So
Okay.
Jen asked to clarify, DCSD will accept outside Wisc testing. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. So we do accept outside testing, and we'll do that, and we'll look at that. We'll look at the CogAT and put it with the full body of evidence.
Okay. Yeah. And then Marnie asked a very similar question. So if somebody chooses to pay for a private Wisc 5, do you take that into account? So
yes. Yep, we do.
Right. Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. So again, thank you so much for joining us, teaching us more about the CogAT, and thank you everyone for joining and learning along with me. I know that I have a very much broader understanding of how the Wisc works, and what I'm super fascinated by is the way that the profiles are divided into those 9 things. Yes. I did not realize that when I had gotten the CogAT results from my daughter. So now I might have to go figure out what they were.
Yes, and if you have questions, again, with your scores, just go ahead and ask. It's usually the gifted education facilitator is going to have a little bit more information, but a lot of the times the teachers know as well.
Wonderful. And then just so everyone knows, we are planning to have a GT 101 at the end of March. So that information on when and where and all that stuff will be coming out. We're also going to have another DCAGT live on the 11th of April, and we're going to be discussing resources for families of gifted students. So if you haven't completed the survey, we ask that you go ahead and do that. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. And Jen, you're not harassing us. You're just asking great questions. So thank you for asking your great questions. And we hope to see you next time. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night.